Now, Jesse, you went on mute.
Her voice is familiar.
Back. You're back. Sort of. Mute again.
Okay.
Okay, you're back.
I've been recording. Sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the, I think, first hybrid meeting of the Executive Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4. My name is Jeffrey LaFrancois. I'm chair of the board and calling this meeting to order this evening. To start the meeting, because we are meeting in person and also virtually, I'd like to ask the folks who are Zooming in with us tonight to go around and just quickly say your name. So those of us in the room know who is on the line if you are a member of the executive committee. Jesse, do you want to call folks out?
I will. I'll start with Marty.
Marty DeCat. Good evening, everybody.
I see Carrie.
Hi, Carrie Keenan, co-chair of Chelsea Land Use.
Why do I see Frank? Okay.
JD is here.
I see JD.
Hey, good evening, Jean Danielle, member of the committee.
I see Dale.
Hi, everyone. Dale Corvino, co-chair Transportation Committee.
And then I see Roberta.
Hi, everyone. Roberta Barnett, co-secretary of the board.
And we have 8 members of the public in the attendees.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for coming together. Feel a little off because I'm not at my desk. Agenda this evening, certainly in advance. I'm going to pass this over to our first vice chair and co-chair of Chelsea Land Use to take us through the first item, which is a discussion of a joint land use letter regarding city planning and the city council for the City of Yes carbon neutrality text amendment.
All right, thank you. Yes. So we had a joint meeting of Chelsea Land Use and Clinton Hell's Kitchen, Paul and JD, Carrie, all participating and leading this discussion. As the letter suggests, this is City of Yes is part of a 3-pronged City of Yes strategy. The first of which is to focus on carbon neutrality or reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. The group from the mayor's office, from Department of City Planning came and presented. They gave a thorough presentation, which probably was in a Dropbox.
Yes.
At some point, thank you. This is really part of a several now months-long process to get community feedback on this proposal. We wanted to bring a draft letter before the executive tonight because we anticipate that this is going to be on borough board and wanted Jeffrey to have a sense of where we were kind of shaking out on this set of proposals. They did just email Jesse this afternoon saying that they're extending the deadline even further from August to September. I don't know what that is going to mean for the borough board discussion.
It was announced that we'll be taking it up next month. So I hope that I can go with our position to continue to push it forward because borough board can be a long meeting. And so it would be nice to go with this.
Just to be fair, the clarity is that the comment period doesn't extend, it's just the CPC hearing. And so because it's not technically a regular ULURP, they're saying that they would accept comments from community boards up to that date. So if we still want to have it in by July 3rd, we are either voting it out tonight or the June exec. But if that is not a concern, then we can have it go out, July at our July board meeting, full 2 months to comment.
Great. So obviously what's reflected before you is very much a draft. We wanted to get something, again, directionally to point us in a certain direction. I think we're still waiting on some substantive feedback. Other committees have also heard this. Transportation. So Christina, I know you sent a red line in this afternoon with some additional comments. WPE took this up, and we know through Joe's participation in the presentation that he has some very specific comments based on his experience, notably not yet reflected in this draft, so that is missing. And so this is I wrote in an email, very drafty, like I couldn't even commit to the word draft because it's not Leslie. Your comments are in the letter. And so anyway, this is, generally, I think the feedback that we want to send Jeffrey off to with at exec is both that this is very promising. This is a good thing to reduce our reliance. However, this is a very broad brush that they are using for a citywide approach when we have very specific unique qualities of our district and likely others do as well. And so we need a little bit more of a scalpel here to ensure that we have the applicability of these proposals applied appropriately. They did say very clearly that this is not intended to produce any new mandates, that this is really to adjust zoning to allow for the things that other laws have put forward. And so in some cases, I think there was some reaction, which we tried to capture here, in which we felt they didn't go far enough in reducing our reliance. But as they would say, as the Department of City Planning responded to us and saying, well, we're not looking to create new mandates. So it is sort of this tightrope we're walking, but wanted the letter to be sure to call out where we thought there could be further opportunities to advance along these goals of reducing reliance. Again, some very specific feedback here, though much of it does need to be further fleshed out. This was really an attempt to get it all in one place. So you have that before you. And as importantly, there's several areas in which we needed more specific information, especially connected to the storage of energy, the equipment, and what its impact on FAR might be. And we are waiting for feedback still from DCP on that. So want to be sure we call those points out in the letter.
Thank you. Let's start if there's questions online. Jesse, is there anybody?
That'd be great. Does anybody have anything on who's on calling in, have anything to comment on or question? You can raise your hand. That's Marty. I see Marty first. Go ahead, Marty.
Thank you. Wow. What a lot of work you did, even in this drafty version. Congratulations, you've covered a lot of the tracks. I have one sore point, and that's on page 2, in both lines 19 and following and lines 26. We don't agree as a group as to whether or not there should be setbacks. So you have to sort of be careful at that part of the letter when you do that wording.
Okay, that's helpful feedback to remind. So am I correct in saying that WPE was in favor of 100%, which would mean no setback, whereas land use was concerned about the lack of a setback for the impact that it would have, especially in special districts, but I think even more generally in reshaping the landscape. I hope we can find a way in saying that it should in part be contextual, or at least be considered with community input. And I think that's largely missing right now, as again, if it's a whole citywide approach, it's not allowing for that opportunity for individual feedback based on what's appropriate for a district.
What I'd like to see you include is the fact that we don't all agree about 100% or not 100% coverage, and that while aesthetics are important, solar energy is going to change the face of the city, and it was expressed at Waterfront and Parks, and I'll be corrected if somebody wants to change this, that while the aesthetics are important and while historic districts are important, it is also important to get as much solar up as possible.
I think we can reflect that there's not agreement on this, but that there are various voices. I think that's.
You've done that before. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else online, Jesse?
Nothing from our members. I end up in attendees.
Okay, any members of the board present with questions or comments on this? Katie?
I just have a process question. I'm not clear. So what's the goal? Like, is the goal to take feedback and then continue to work on the letter, and then we'll look at sort of a final draft at our June meeting? Or is
so this will then, we have 2 weeks till our full board. And
so
so
we're
this,
gonna vote on, okay.
yes, So that way I can bring it to Borough Board, which is the 12th or 15th of June, something like that. And so, we've taken a position, I get to bring it. Ideally, I'm the first chair to circulate a letter, and so perhaps our letter guides the framework for the Borough Board, reso.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
I have a question.
I'm gonna go to Alan and then Leslie.
Thank you. Excellent work. Page 2 on specific feedback, you mentioned tree beds allowed but not required.
I don't know what that means.
I think there was, this is where it was actually connected to the parking. I think ultimately gets addressed in your comments,
Right.
Christine, so I think that can come out
Oh, good.
there and is referenced in yours, but it was ultimately a conflict related to like where this solar was vis-a-vis the parking garages and sidewalk. Does
Yeah,
that
so
sound-
we fixed that saying that we don't want them to remove existing trees and existing greenery for the sake of coming all the way to the cover in parking lots. So they need to find a way to maintain the greenery.
And on page 3, line 4 zoning distinction between individual, you mentioned bikes and then you go to commercial vehicles.
No, I have, that's removed now.
Oh, so what's the new?
No, I mean, there is the new paragraph which is in there, but the old
Bullets.
notes were not removed. So when I realized that, I removed them.
So, no, so
It is include, so sorry, we were working very quickly, so apologies on, I put some bulleted
Bullets,
notes and then on Sunday copied Christine's comments in full without removing the bulleted notes. And
Right.
so there's like a duplication of sorts, but hers are obviously much clearer. And what was uploaded to the Dropbox early this morning has both. So nothing's been added, nothing we're referring to has been added since it has been uploaded. Just we didn't remove something, but it's.
and it's most of the bullets that got removed.
Yes,
exactly.
Because it's actually written out
Right.
in the transportation section, so
It
it's
went
like the
from-
bullet
it
in the
went from
transportation
bullet
section.
to a section.
And it's just the language, it's the paragraphs.
When you're talking about bullets, you're talking about
The dashes,
the dashes, blanket forts, tree beds.
yes.
One last thing, if I may, on page 3, paragraph starting, line 17 about the warm neighborhoods and the cool neighborhoods. There was, I believe, something in the papers a while back, there was a study about the lack of trees. Which maybe you want to incorporate that into,
I think it's in there.
well, there's something about.
You want us
Is it
to
where
cite the
warm
article?
Places are often blacker and
Maybe
more.
refers to something that there's a study done.
No, it said correlates somewhat with race.
Raised in
and income.
income.
That's from that study.
Well, the study was more about the lack of trees. I mean.
No, the lack of trees was
in
missing.
foreign neighborhoods.
Right, exactly.
Maybe-
We can build that,
Maybe some
I
reference.
remember the study.
Yeah, there was a time that I wanted to, we might be able to cite that also.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was intended to do that.
Thank you.
Leslie?
I said a question actually, but I want to say, Jessica, WPE appreciates the consideration of so when land use and the points that were here about the setbacks, is the only concern for land use, because I was on the meeting, I didn't talk, I was listening, is visuals and possibly shadows, or is there some sort of structural why they wanted the setback? Was it mostly visual?
I think it's visual, I mean, it's also shadows and not being able to fully anticipate. Also vis-a-vis other buildings that may, like the landscape is continually evolving, shadows, light and air. Also just visually the impact of changing what will be the thoroughfare of.
That's what
Especially when compared with 100% and at 15 feet.
right, then what,
We have two other co-chairs and.
Yeah,
so,
After this, we'll go to this.
Okay,
okay, so then I just want to reiterate what Marty said, that, the sacrifice of the visual is, we think, not only necessary, but.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think we can at least
I just
recognize
wanted
that
to get
there
it clear,
are discrepancies.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't another.
But we should definitely turn to
Thank you.
JD, Karen.
Yeah.
Yep.
on this one, the order that they were raised, Carrie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe help address that question that Leslie just asked. Because there's no carve out for historic districts or special districts. It's just a blanket citywide zoning change. This was is a big issue for the land use committees. It doesn't take into account the historic districts. So that's another point that I don't think has been mentioned yet, but I think is in the that Jessica had written. And in our meeting, I don't recall who said it, but there was an architect, and maybe it was David Holoka, who said that when you attach, the reason that they gave for wanting to eliminate the setback, which is only 6 feet, was because it will better support the solar panel structure if it's attached to the front cornice of the building. And that's not in fact true. The support comes from the sides. So it could actually, the weight of that could actually damage the facade. So I just wanted to put that out there as another reason why land use was not 100% in favor of removing this 6-foot setback. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
JD?
Yeah, I want to go back to Marty's comment. Certainly, this is terribly important energy, at least before the waters rise and we're underwater. But I want to be clear about something. I think we're also saying that instead of a blanket rule for the entire city, that we would like a more thoughtful approach, not block by block, but perhaps neighborhood by neighborhood. So Marty, how does that fit in with your concern? Just blanket or a more considerate approach? Would you accept that thinking?
Yes, I would. I think even if an array were going to cover 100% of the roof, I don't, and an engineer approved that. So the issue of facade crumbling and all that is taken off the table because it's been engineered in a way that wouldn't happen. Even in that circumstance, I think it's appropriate for community review of things that go on top of roofs. Even though I favor 100% coverage, there may be other reasons not to do it. Only 6 feet could be a lot of energy. And so I prefer not the 6 feet, but it should be reviewed, maybe even on a case-by-case basis. And the trouble with that, of course, is that the agencies don't have the staff to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And we go right back to funding for enforcement and review and all of that, which has been one of our banes since as long as I can remember on the board.
Sure, Marty, that makes total sense. I'm thinking more broadly, the special district, the historic districts, that maybe there should be, instead of a blanket statement, that maybe the board can say, we'd like a more thoughtful approach to that.
I think that, and I know that Leslie and Paul both have commentary as co-chairs of the committee who had input on the letter, but cue from Jessica is that this is still the same that was talked about at the very beginning when this issue got raised, and I think we can strike something, and there could be eyes on it before it's circulated fully to the board. So is there more to
I just
add?
wanted to correct 2 points.
Okay.
So I thought that when I read it, I did read a land use document, surprisingly, that they actually, it wasn't broad strokes, they actually said slope roofs versus flat roofs, heights, I mean, they were pretty, I thought, it wasn't like all roofs get this. They talked about the heights of roofs, they talked about if you're sloped, you can only do this, if you're flat, you can only do this. And then they also did say that LPC would have a say if it was a landmark building, and so they did.
The challenge with number 2 is our next item and the erosion of
Okay.
LPC overview and oversight into proposals. And so I think that might become more clear as we move into that.
Okay, then the second point was, so when I think this is what they think is going to be the same as when a building puts a new boiler in. You have to go through a lot of permits, you have to have everyone signs off from the city, they come in, they check your boiler, and they give, you have to fix it or you don't have to. It's the same they envision it to be the same energy cabling, with the solar roof. So I don't know if community review for every single solar roof is going to be, they have to come in, a guy has to come in, give you a permit for your energy, whether it's boiler with oil, gas, now solar. I think
Right.
it's just an evolution.
I think what it's sort of both points that you just referenced, which is, yes, there's a difference between flat roofs and pitched roofs, sloped roofs. However, there's a lot of variation within that from, you know, a townhouse to a big building. And so where does that happen? If it's just a guy with a permit and making that, you know, inspection and saying, here you go. And where does that process for community review? And then again, going to the next letter, LPC, you know, feeling chronically, frankly, let down by LPC historically, and then very specifically with these new rules that are being proposed, which feel like they further erode the ability for that kind of staff oversight or individual community input and oversight, because everything is moving to a staff level approval. So I think it's just wanting to be sure that what you're describing of not a wholesale approach actually happens, and not trusting that the process is just being designed that way.
Thank you.
Pause,
No, sorry. No, one of the things I've thought about since the meeting and didn't raise it at the meeting is that these regulations don't take into account the plane exposures that we have in residential towers. They talk about not putting solar panels on the setbacks of tall buildings, but that same plane exposure could work on all buildings now. So we could say, if they're going to be at 15 feet, that might violate the plane exposure that's already in existing zoning. So why don't we reference that and say you shouldn't, even at 15 feet, you shouldn't violate the plane exposure rules that we have for residential buildings that allow light and air onto the streets. So on the taller buildings, the 15 feet probably won't violate that, but on the shorter buildings, it might. And that might be the way to strike a compromise to follow the existing rules. Some of those townhouses might then force a 6-foot setback if you're putting a 15-foot canopy that's causing shadows down onto the street. So maybe we look into something like that as the compromise,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's those kind of things that, Leslie, to your comment, like there's some suggestion of the differences between zones or different kinds of roof structures, but there simply wasn't enough and
Detail, yeah.
and then given the historic special districts that we have and the commitment to preserving those, and then our experience with LPC on top of that, it was just an overall there and making sure that we call attention
And to
to.
echo on LPC, within the historic districts, you can't do roof additions that you can see visibly from 6 feet on the sidewalk across. So that sight line should be protected in the historic district as well, and
Which is
that could be a way.
something we're concerned is being removed entirely with the LPC
Correct.
rule changes. So that ability to mark something up and for you to see from the street, if they're taking that away, how will we really know whether or not these things are compliant or not?
Christine, final point, and then I want, that's okay.
Could we generally ask for a separate review and separate rules for the special districts and the landmark district? Because in our district, that would cover pretty much all the structures that we are concerned about. So
Right.
we would want to have, just like the special district in the zoning, has a whole set of rules, and there would be one more rule after a review, for the district. And then you are covering everything that we are worried about.
Yeah.
We did ask at the meeting, at the land use meeting, and the representative said that he would get back to us.
Right. I think we should put it in our.
Yeah, they had been considering historic districts, not special districts.
Right, but I
So
think we should
need
put
to add
special
that.
districts.
Yeah.
If we put those two, we're pretty much
Covered
covered.
90% of our district. Katie?
I think that, that proposal addresses my question, because I couldn't quite tell if we were saying, yes, we want to ask also for like specific community board review or different rules for our community board versus other community boards, because that doesn't strike me as that would sort of fly and how you draft that legally, and then everybody's going to be doing different things. But if we do it, as you said, if we ask for special district and historic district, that is actually going to cover our needs, right? Without saying it's community board specific.
Yeah, I know, again, this is really draft, so there's a lot of interpretation. I don't think we were suggesting that community board 4 we weren't requesting that we would get like a special audience to review this, but rather
But
that.
we do.
But we would like that, but that these things are consistent with the needs of our district and require this attention and, you know, on behalf, like, that's our experience, so that's what we're gonna speak to, but I would expect that others similarly would fall.
Would want them.
Yeah.
So I think this, oh, Jeffrey,
I was gonna say, maybe add even more, conservative language, you could say in the preservation areas of the special district, because in general, that's what you're concerned about, and for the Paul and JD, but, you know, I mean, outside of the preservation areas of a lot of the special districts, like Paul said, there's gonna be just a lot of buildings that we're not gonna notice or care about it, but, and that might also just be able to then create a lot more variety, and so that's just my suggestion.
And then the other question I asked you, Jessica, we had the discussion about 15 feet versus 9 feet and whether or not, how they justified the 15 feet, because they're building at 15 feet to go above the bulkheads. But our understanding is that FDNY only needs 9 feet of clearance. So maybe if we bring it down to 9 feet, that also might address a lot of these issues. The 15 feet seemed arbitrary.
Yeah, so we can be sure to include that in our request for more information.
Thanks.
I'm just taking notes from the auditor.
so thank you, everybody, for the discussion and for us getting to there.
One member of the public.
Okay, we'll take a member of the public, please.
Take a look.
David, good evening. David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, what's your, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, some comments. You know, Paul was just talking about 15 feet versus 9 feet. I think the whole point of the 15 feet is to get to 100% solar panels over the high part of the roof. And, you know, the current rule is only 25% of the roof can be solar panels. So they're really upping this to the maximum extreme. And I think that's kind of where the problem lies. I think they could pretty non-controversially double the amount that's allowed now from 25 to 50%. And the panels could be right down very near roof height. They talk about needing access for the fire department, but I think the fire department would only need corridors of access from the building perimeter to the fire stair, the bulkhead, you know, as a practical matter. Maybe it could go back to the fire department. But the only reason for going to 15 feet is to clear the tops of penthouses, and you know, it's really shooting for the moon. And you know, what I'd like to see is something that was more considered and perhaps took into account actual buildings. We have a ton of Greek Revival row houses in Chelsea that aren't landmarked. They're not in a special district, and it would have a huge impact on their appearance if suddenly they had a 15-foot high array of solar panels right up to the street facade above the roof line. And also the rule is that you can exceed zoning by 15 feet. So if a building is not built to its full zoning allowed height, let's say it's 20 feet short, what that suggests to me is that you could raise an array up 35 feet above its roof. And, you know, potentially do that to capture rays of sun coming over the top of a taller building nearby. I don't see, you know, that kind of thing addressed or considered. There are about 60 Greek Revival row houses that we would like to add to the extension of the Chelsea Historic District. They're not landmarked yet. Hopefully they will be before too long. But it would be a shame, you know, to kind of indiscriminately add these arrays to the tops of buildings. You know, I think probably most of our buildings in Chelsea are pre-war, I would guess, or close to half of them. And it's a big impact on that kind of building, which typically terminates with a cornice that was meant to be the visual termination of the building. But separate from that, you know, the light and air thing is a really big deal. And I could see how setting back by 6 feet certainly would allow a lot more light to get down to the street and more
view of the sky from the street level, which is what zoning is all about, going back to the 1916 ordinance based on the equitable building. So, you know, I think that it's been kind of a broad brush thing of trying to get from 25% solar panels to 100%, which is the maximum, which sounds a little bit like more of a starting point for a discussion than where this should end up. So I would ask for something that might be short of 100%, but a lot better. That doesn't raise all of these concerns. And I don't know if that can be worked into the letter, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Any other hands, Jesse?
Nope.
Okay, great. So with that and these comments and Jessica's stewardship over the letter, I'll take a motion to adopt the letter.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And seconded. We will take this, gosh, we have to do this, yeah. But I'm gonna do it in reverse. So, any abstentions? Present, not eligible. Any objections? With that, the letter passes.
Wait, I'm sorry, Berta, that was just, you thought you were voting yes, right?
No, I was voting no on the letter.
Bert is voting no.
We're voting no.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have the counts based on the fact that we know how many people are here with 1 no vote.
1 no vote. yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica, but I think you stay on the podium. For Carrie, for item 2, the Joint Land Use Committee letters to LPC regarding the proposed rule amendments and rule changes. Carrie?
Yes, thanks. So as Jeffrey said, this is a letter to LPC regarding rule making changes to 4 chapters of the LPC rules and adding 1 new chapter, chapters 2, 5, 7, 12, and 14 to be exact. We had a joint land use committee meeting on this as well, or rather at our joint land use committee, we took up this as well. And we recommended denial of these changes due to 2 main issues. The first is an issue of process on this vote from LPC. We're here bringing this to a vote at exec because this letter has been, you know, inappropriately this process has been inappropriately fast-tracked. This community boards were given about an hour's notice to attend a presentation on the rule changes the day after last month's Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting, where LPC calendared a vote for tomorrow. So these are, you know, complicated, detailed rule changes, and there's been no real chance for public input. It won't go before the full board before LPC votes tomorrow, and so we oppose the letter, or we oppose the rule changes for that reason first. Secondly, the content of the rule changes, most of which are fine, but some of which sort of in concert with what we've just been talking about, which is this idea of kind of as of right, we're against the majority of rule changes, specifically in chapter 2, because they move the approval process from a commissioner level approval to a staff level approval of things like minimally visible solar panels, you know, solar charging stations, ESS, mechanical equipment, HVAC equipment, changing of the streetscape with bios walls and, you know, extended tree pits. And what happens when you move something from commissioner level to staff level, there is no community board input and there is no public input allowed. It just simply goes to the staff to approve, and we don't have any say whatsoever, meaning the community. So we are denying this letter or these changes. The letter recommends denial of the changes, I guess, in total, because, you know, because of the process and this issue of changes to staff level approval without public comment. We would be in favor of a majority of them. We also ask LPC to defer this vote until we can get some better understanding of like what minimally visible means to the issue that Jessica was bringing up before, as well as, there are listed a bunch of questions in the letter, so I won't go through them all, but that's pretty much it, unless anyone has
Thank you,
any
Carrie.
questions.
First, we'll start with hands on the screen. Jesse, anybody
Any
from the committee?
Any committee members? Roberta?
So I did have a question about the staff level approval piece of this. My understanding is that part of the interest in staff level approval is that it is taking a considerable amount of time to approve these various upgrades to individual buildings, and that causes issues for people living in those buildings and the owners. Have the land use committees considered those issues in particular? I certainly understand all of the concerns about process, but my understanding is that there's some utility to having these staff level approvals for certain projects.
Yeah, so the joint committees were not against staff level approval for a lot of things like master plans, and I think it's really changes to public thoroughfares and what equipment what does minimally visible mean? There's no real definition in these rules, and there has not been an opportunity for us to get an answer, to question or get an answer on that. So, for example, there's all these there's language around things like it can be more than minimally visible if it's seen through a gap. But it's like, what does a gap mean? If you walk down 20th Street and you're walking past the seminary, the whole thing is a gap. So, you know what I mean? It's like, there's no real clear definition of what some of this means. So it's sort of hand in hand with the idea of staff level approval plus as of right for, all of these new ideas, which I think we are all very much in favor of. It's just that it feels too rushed and too much of a blanket sentiment without any clear-cut definitions. So we don't really have a choice but to recommend denial until we get more information, and we still might recommend denial on certain rules because there's 500 of them in those 4 chapters. Sorry, I'm exaggerating. There aren't 500, but yeah.
No, I think that's helpful. So the denial is not specifically on that staff level approval. It is the lack of understanding that the commission has put forth with regard to what that actually means, what minimally visible means, and what staff level approvals would actually mean here.
Right. And I think that there might still be some rules, like, a handful of rules that we might still want the commissioner level approval on so that we can have public input. But the majority of these would, I think, fly through.
Christine?
Yes, Carrie, I understand when you're saying we would be in favor of the majority of the rules to become staff. I mean, wouldn't that be helpful to put that in the letter and say we are in favor of those, but those 1, 2, and 3 are really an issue and you absolutely must answer those? Because when you say a little bit, we deny everything, people have a tendency to discount that. So
Yeah.
My concern is that maybe we could be more forceful with those things that you want to deny by isolating them from the rest.
Yeah, so I think the letter says that chapter 2 is really what we take issue with. And then, there are multiple rules within chapter 2. And it outlines what those are, and that we are in approval of 5, 7, 12, and 14. But if that doesn't seem clear, then we can try to make it more clear.
Perhaps could we frame this more as a deny unless factor, or is there a way to do a significant portion that's deny unless? We note up front the objection to the lack of process or the forced process. But I think finding a way to note that we do approve or we would support a lot of these things would at least probably get the rest of our letter read, as opposed to a straight no, in that first paragraph.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're gonna keep going this way, but I have Bert and then Katie. Bert?
Yeah, I would, couple of things. Right in the beginning of the letter, we say, President, recommend the Landmark Preservation Commission denial of proposed amendment to the landmark plan rule. And we should put the reason right up front. The reason is, I suggest some language, I don't know, whatever, because of the lack of clarity in definitions, and we're talking in chapter 2, and diminishment of community involvement. Okay, and then on page 2, I would emphasize again in lines 10, 11, and 12, but the hasty process with the commission calendar to vote on this matter and the elimination of public input. Such a weak word, input. It's sort of not weak. It's kind of sterile. We're really not talking about public input. We're talking about public, again, involvement, public, the community being part of the process.
That's what we're talking about.
You know, so I think I would prefer we had some other word input, and then it's a little unclear. I think I know what we're talking about here. Of some highly critical components of our district. We're talking about regarding some of our special districts.
Right.
I think we need to be more specific what these critical components are, I think. And just a minor piece on line 45. I think we're talking about the June full board meeting, not the May.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't hear that, Bert.
On the line 45, we make reference to our May full board meeting, but I think we mean the June full board meeting. Says the May 23rd vote.
Yes, you're right.
Will occur before it holds our June meeting, is what that needs to be. Yep. Katie?
I think I have two questions. The first one is sort of a timing or a process question. So it sounds like this vote is happening tomorrow. And I'm wondering what kind of letter, like, is it an administrative letter? Like, what could be sent before their meeting so that they know that we have these real concerns? And so I'm just wondering, is it like 2 letters? We just vote on a very short one that's, or maybe we don't have to vote on an administrative letter. I don't know the rules, sorry. But like, I think we should let them know, hey, guys.
I mean, if you all vote on this tonight, we're setting it. This is the.
We'll have this.
tomorrow.
Because
Okay.
that's the point of the note about the May 23rd, 22nd
Yeah,
meeting.
exactly. I was like,
So this will get ratified by full board.
Yeah, we're sending this.
gotcha. Good, good.
And then
I
it'll
was
be-
like, hold on,
it'll be
what?
released next
I
month.
hope that they're gonna know.
Yes.
Marvelous.
So we vote on this tonight.
Another process question?
Yeah,
Okay, the Landmarks Preservation Commission within themselves vote to have it done. Do they have to get approval by anybody else, or they can act independently?
Yeah. This is the Landmarks Commission, this is the Landmarks Preservation as an agency presenting this to the commission votes on it and it's done.
So it doesn't have to go to council.
that's
Internal
interesting.
rulemaking.
Yeah, it's an amendment to their own rules.
Wow, okay. So then I guess my second thing is, Carrie, I think this is an awesome letter and, yes, so, but I guess my question was, and again, I don't know. Would it be possible to say in those couple of issues where you have concerns and where you want there to be public engagement? Does it maybe not have to go back to the commissioner, but could you say, like, on certain issues, we think even if it's a staff level approval, we would want there to be a public engagement process? Or does that not work?
That doesn't happen with LPC. If it's staff level, it does not go to the public.
Okay,
So, I mean, I did have a line in there, to be honest, that said, you know, a joke that we could like use Rule 14, which is that we can propose new rules to make staff level approval, you know, part of the community process, but I took it out.
Wise choice, but we appreciate that you shared that.
all right, okay, thanks, Karen.
I have one hand up and.
Okay.
Commissioner JD Nolan. Sorry, JD.
JD.
I just, on behalf of Paul and myself, I want to thank Carrie for this terrific letter. She had so little time to put it together. So thank you, and Jessica for the other letter. And from now on, let's just have joint meetings and Jessica and Carrie can do all the work. I think.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you, JD. So with that, I will take, we have a member of the public.
Yes, we do.
That is what we'll take.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the distraction, but it is weird.
David Holoka, whenever you're ready.
And we're fully on board with the letter, David, and aware of the summary and the gist that we're trying to get across. So any new
Sorry,
comments?
I'm just gonna say that David also had the letter all weekend. Out of courtesy.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
I just want to point out that we won't be able to submit this letter officially to Landmarks in time. It'll have to be simply read in 3 minutes tomorrow. And Carrie, are you lined up to speak to Landmarks or Jessica?
You know we are, David.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear. And, maybe we could send a letter as a follow-up. Officially, the deadline was noon today. But you could mention that in light of the limited time that they gave us, you hope that they will accept it in writing as well.
I'm gonna let Jesse speak to that.
Yeah, for clarity's sake, the deadline that you're speaking about is for testimony for the commissioners. The comment period ends tomorrow. So anybody can still make comments, send comments in until the end of the day, the close of business tomorrow. Well, not close of business, I'm sorry, because they're voting, but till tomorrow, but the deadline you're speaking about is the actual written testimony to the commissioners, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I
David.
just, before we vote, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I have like Bert's notes and Christine's notes, but there was a question about deny unless versus deny.
Well,
And I just want to, yeah, I know, I understand we did discuss it at land use, but the vote was to specifically deny versus deny unless, because it felt, I'm just recalling, what people said in that meeting, stronger and more forceful. And that was a conscious decision, and then vote on that from the land use committees.
I mean, it would be frankly out of step with our long held principle of making sure that we are nuanced in our objections so that they're actually read. If we have anything positive up front to say, we would lead with that, and then so that it is acknowledged. And I think that our objection is more based on process. And I have a pretty strong sense the commission is going to take a vote tomorrow. So I just think we should highlight the fact that we are supportive of one and object to the other, and your process stinks. I mean, is that, I don't know that that's out of sync with an absolute objection. We're still objecting to their process and pointing out a rule we like versus those we don't like.
I mean, in either case, if we're looking to change the recommendation from that came out of the joint committee, we'd be making it.
Exactly. To the letter.
Yeah.
I would just bear in mind the 3 minutes. That's like 450 words that we're going to get tomorrow.
Dude, we're not, this letter will be sent regardless of how many minutes we have on the microphone. And I think frankly, this is the record, this is the piece for the record.
Yes, I that's why I brought it up. I want to make sure that this is, I only have tonight, so I want to make sure that it's correct.
JD has a friend with us.
JD?
Yeah, it's important to get the strength of our denial in there. So perhaps we could say we strongly deny unless. I think it's important to emphasize that the committees were strongly concerned about this. So would that be a possible compromise?
I think so. Jessica, were you?
Well, I would just add that this is not a standalone issue. This comes off of many months, if not years, frustration with LPC and the way they conducted themselves and vis-a-vis the public and considered input. And you know, I think there is an overall macro strategy that we need to consider about how we engage with the board. Because I don't think, you know, like, do you catch more, you know, flies with honey? But I don't know if in this case, I feel like this is too strong of too important of an issue for us to try to be making friends. I think in general, we should be. Maybe we should be pointing out when they make positive strides, and frankly, maybe we want another letter. We actually have a meeting with folks from LPC. Maybe we want to reach out to them separately to suggest, like, have a discussion about the things we do like, and just in a more informal dialogue about that. But I do think there's been now a period of very significant frustration with how they perceived our recommendations. And I would be concerned about losing some of that.
And we do say at the end, we appreciate the long-standing partnership. But that's. give me that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
How about at this point in time?
It's Article 14.
I look around for a straw poll.
We have two more hands up, Roberta and then Marty.
So I would just second the interest in a denial unless relating to the reasons that Jeffrey and Christina have outlined, but just for another one, it appears that there are some open questions relating to minimally visible. And so I certainly disagree with the process that, you know, the board's not sufficiently informed as to what that means as it undertakes this vote. But I don't feel comfortable like being opposed to something I fundamentally am uncertain or don't understand. I understand why we are opposed to it on process grounds, but substantively, I think that I personally lack information to determine if that's appropriate. So I would appreciate the consideration of an unless here for that reason.
We'll go to the Jake, Marty, and then we'll go to Bert. Marty?
I know we don't change our wording a lot. I really like the committee's deny position, but I understand the deny unless parry. Can we say we deny this stuff with these exceptions rather than deny unless? Because we approve some of the exceptions. So let's keep the deny and just tell them what the exceptions are.
Bert?
One, I was gonna say that this is not like DLP. You deny unless you bring it down to midnight and close your windows and stuff like that, which is very specific. This doesn't really this would not easily fit into a deny unless, in my view. And I think deny is strong. I mean, we have had a good relationship with you, but we're denying this right now. And that's strong and loud and clear. I would rather keep it that way than, you know, modify it and make it sound a little easier and sweeter. We're not sweet. We don't like what you're doing.
So, thank you, Bert. I'm gonna go to Leslie and then Katie.
I'm gonna agree. I think I'm gonna agree with Bert and second everything Bert just said and what Jessica said. I think this is also what Jessica said, long-standing. You know, there have been steps to this point, number one, and I don't think they're gonna be offended. I think they're big boys and girls that, you know, they've heard stuff like this before. They're not gonna say, oh my goodness, they said deny. We're not gonna read them. I mean, I think they're used to this, you know, they know. I don't think it would hurt our standing. I think that reputation has already been, I hope sealed. Though Marty brought up a good point, we maybe want to say there are exceptions that we agree with, but I would have to agree with Bert and Jessica and their reasoning.
I don't mind Marty's suggestion personally to make sure we just say, you know, upfront that instead of leaving it to the back, like what we agree with, that we deny this, you know, except for what seem like the majority, 4 more chapters, but are actually not. Chapter 2 is like 60 pages and the rest are like 5. So, but you know, I don't mind that personally.
All right, JD. JD, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Also, part of the thinking with the land use committees, and I'm going to ask David Holoka about this. There was a concern that this is part of a process to completely eliminate public process. And so that was a big concern. And that was one reason the denial was so strong. David, am I off base about that?
No, I mean, for the most part, what's being proposed they're pretty benign things. You know, you can
Right.
replace a banner that's already been approved with different, a banner of the same size. You can switch to canvas and you can change what the sign says. Like, I don't know that, a lot of it was really non-controversial. It was more, and many of these changes, I think, are meant to be synced with the City of Yes changes. So, they're looking at how to deal with adding solar collectors or solar panels to the roof of buildings in historic districts. Unfortunately, the examples that they've given tend to be more like pitched roofs in freestanding houses in Brooklyn, and not for a flat roofed early 19th century row house like we have so many of in our historic districts. So what does minimally visible mean in that case? And the other one, the big one, was like locating tree pits and bioswales, either at staff level, which is being proposed, or having those go to a public hearing where the public can weigh in. And I think that given the potential impact, say, on sight lines to important architectural features on a building like the General Theological Seminary, there you would want people to be able to weigh in on, should a tree be here, or commissioners to be able to weigh in. And bioswales, there's a group of row houses on 24th Street between 9th and 10th Avenue that are an individual landmark. They're just a row of houses. They all have front gardens that come right up to the sidewalk and paired entrances. And those set up a very important kind of landscape in front of them. The bioswales would be sort of an extension of those, and they ought to be coordinated in some way or take them into account. I wouldn't want that to be happening simply at staff level without the public's ability to weigh in. A lot of people in the community are very big on planting around tree pits or on medians and streets. I think they should have an opportunity to have a say. So it's not simply a matter of saying everything going forward is going to be reviewed at staff without a public hearing. It's really kind of subtle things, and the ones that we have major objections to are, what is minimally visible in terms of rooftop mechanical equipment, and what is a gap. It can be more than minimally visible and approved by staff if it's seen through a gap between buildings on a secondary facade. So
Thanks, David.
Katie?
I was just trying to think of some language that if we did go with deny unless, that would incorporate what we were saying, and we could just say deny unless the vote is postponed to allow for public input, including specifically on chapter 2. But otherwise,
There's been no proposal.
But the vote is tomorrow.
yeah.
Correct. So on process, the fact of the matter is, if we want to change from going from outright denial to a deny unless, that if we propose it as an amendment to the letter, I do think with the appropriate wordsmithing, it could be achieved to still frame our letter in that way. But I also don't think, I'll be honest, I think it's important we need to be on the record and get this done. The vote is going to be taken tomorrow. I think so. I don't see the need to overrule a committee vote at this point. It doesn't change much of the way of our position. If somebody feels differently, please make the motion to amend the letter. But right now, I think it would just make sense to move forward as written. So with that, I'll take a motion to adopt as written.
So
Thank you, Katie. Is there a second? Christine, thank you. Okay, and just on process, because my last vote wasn't as good for the public, we will start, and folks online, please raise your hands accordingly, and in the room as well. All in favor of the letter as drafted, please raise your hand for yes.
Any objections? Any abstentions?
One abstention, Roberta.
One abstention, thank you. Present not eligible. Okay, thanks, everybody. That letter passes. Item 3, our perennial Pier 94 discussion, which unfortunately may sunset come Wednesday. Without much gain, frankly. This is in its final day of 30-day review, a process prescribed by the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. This is the lease that EDC is putting forth to sign with Vornado, Blackstone, and Hudson Pacific. You received today a draft that we'd like to submit. And I want to throw out the fact that we have 2 opportunities here. We can submit for the, well, actually, I have to call in to a conference call on Wednesday to submit our testimony. Very old school, no link whatsoever. And then, but I'm wondering if we can send this as a letter before Wednesday, because our ask is to table the lease and address, our bullets that we've prescribed. Repeatedly taken up by WPE and transportation. And so this is our sort of our Hail Mary. There was a piece in Cranes that was reported on this. And the elected officials also sent a letter. I will be blunt, not nearly as strong as I would have liked it to have been on this topic. And so I'm looking I'm throwing everything in, and I think you guys know that on this one. Leslie or Christine, any comments based on your committees on this and where we are?
I like how you,
Very good.
yeah, and
Okay.
I think, unlike the other discussion, I think I can go full force.
I couldn't agree more. Of course, couldn't agree more. Yep, Paul?
So, just some clarification issues. In the beginning of the letter, you mentioned Pier 92 and 94, but then the rest of the letter just addresses 94.
Because the new lease removes 92.
Right, so I think that we need, much like we've experienced with 94, where it's been years of neglect to get us to this point where they're saying now we're gonna ask for more help to get it fixed. I think that's also a step that they're taking with 92, correct? They're gonna try to come back to us in a few years for 92 and ask for benefits at 92 because they've been neglectful at 92 as well as 94. And so I think, that's a pattern with them that, like we saw them do it at Hotel Pennsylvania. They bought the hotel and let it fall into disrepair until they finally say it's gotta come down, right? So now we're at this point with Piers 92 and 94, where 94 is up for this lease. I liked my favorite line of the letter was, why doesn't this go back up for RFP? There's significant enough changes, let someone else do this. If you're not gonna do it, let someone else do it, right? So push it away from them, but include 92 and 94 together, because I don't wanna see this happen in 92 again in 5 more years or 10 more years. So
a couple
that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, you're right. We lost on the require them both to be, and because EDC viewed Vornado as the existing tenant, they felt they didn't have to go to RFP. They allowed them to redefine the scope. It narrowed the scope to 94 only. I have no problem with sort of, I think, saying they should be included both as an RFP. But the only thing that is slightly better in this lease that didn't exist in the previous is that the city's commitments expire after 2060. Where on the previous lease, it was in perpetuity of the lease, so the 99-year term. So a very, very minor gain.
But I think I'm questioning the underlying premise that since we're not always the current leaseholder, they're being given this opportunity, they have violated their lease. Can we argue that they violated the lease and therefore the lease should be taken from them and let somebody else come in and do an RFP to take over both 92 and 94?
Part of the problem is that it technically was EDC that made it so that 92 is uninhabitable. Like it was EDC that was supposed to be maintaining things and they did not.
I thought it was.
So, yeah, Vornado, was supposed to do what it could above the pier deck, right?
Yeah.
But the city didn't do its job below grade, which we object to also, because we don't think the city should be on the hook for maintaining commercial piers that are, a commercial operation. So that's our references to Hudson River Park,
Yeah.
because, recall our fight with the Intrepid, right? Like, we don't dislike the Intrepid, but the fact at the end of the day, they're on the hook for capital cost, which is very significant.
They don't have capital costs and they pay a lease on
Correct.
top of that. So
Yes.
that's where I'm.
Um, so
All frustrating.
This is
Yeah.
beyond- this is-
it's really.
I don't, yeah, I mean, just for the record, this is why people get frustrated with government. Seriously, this is one, this is very, very, very upsetting. Is that they're able to get away with this and given a sweetheart deal with no responsibility to even the, I'm just, this is very, very. frustrating.
There's, I mean, there's
No,
the
by the way,
critical,
knowing that there are examples where it's done right, just a few blocks down the road.
But this is in my opinion, this is a pattern for NATO.
Yes,
Across the city and across the country, that they intentionally make acquisitions, sit on them until they're so bad that they have to go to the government for assistance.
I mean, look, all of our previous letters did cite the fact that the chairman of Vornado has repeatedly said, they are drawing up the portfolio, they are not moving forward with
Yeah.
projects. And the Cranes article spoke to Blackstone, and Blackstone has not committed as a 25% partner on the project. So we've thrown all of that out there already. I
Any
am
insight?
gonna make a full court press literally on our updated letter as well again.
and you know that there's a new subsidy by the governor
For film and TV.
for film and TVs. So you know what's going on, right? They are getting the film and TV grant from the
It wasn't
governor.
nearly as good as they
And
wanted.
somebody called EDC and said you better give them the floor, otherwise they can't use it. So it's happening at two levels. It's just,
Okay,
I'm really upsetting.
So that's the insight. That's
That's the inside.
I mean, I think that we knew this was coming, they've been planning for this for more than a year, and that tax credit proposal's been out for a year. Yeah, but again, it's,
I
that's a
think
use discussion, and we lost on the use
I
discussion.
think we are.
So we're checking with.
Any members of the committee, online with questions?
Is the CEO of Orlando?
No, I do have one member from the public. I'll call him about.
Any other questions from the committee in the room?
Send it out.
Member of the public?
Someone different.
Oh, okay.
Katie Savage, when you are ready.
Hi, Katie. Go
Hello,
ahead.
this is such an interesting format. So, I know a lot of the other leases that you were highlighting were within Hudson River Park. But I dug up the lease for the cruise ship terminal with Ports America, and they agreed to take the premises as is from the city and commit to doing extensive fendering repairs and a lot of the other repairs. So if you're looking for a more analogous
Very useful.
comparison, Pier 88 and 90 might help.
That's very useful. Do they have the dates on them? Because there's been multiple amendments, Katie, and so I just wanna, or if you have it, if you wanna flip it to me, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'll send you what I have.
Okay,
I think it was somewhat recent. I think it was like a 2017 lease.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, our next.
The initial term started July 1st, 2017. So I'm not sure
Okay,
if there
great.
had been an amendment since then. And the base rent was $1 million. And then it went up to 2 million the next year. And the
Oh,
rent
but-
is tied to inflation.
Yeah, so it's what we would expect for a deal. Okay, thank you for taking that up.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, next.
Oh, well, that's sort of the cruise ship terminal. What a joke it is, in many, many ways.
Many ways.
So, thank you for taking that up, Katie. I appreciate it and the references. And also, just so folks know, I spoke to Brooklyn Bridge Park. There was a lot of other borough research. EDC is scrambling to try to find parallels to share with us and the electeds because there's no parallel that they can pull up here.
Yeah, big surprise.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments on this?
Nothing from Zoom.
Okay, so then I'm gonna say that I'd like to send this as a letter to EDC tomorrow. And then likewise, we'll submit comments at the hearing on Wednesday morning.
Move to approve the letter and some others.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Christine with the second. Okay, so all in favor, hands raised online and in the room?
Everybody.
Any-
Online.
Great, any objections? Present not eligible? Or abstentions? Great, thank you, everybody, and for continuing the fight. Bylaws, is Bob here? Katie, sorry.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, sorry.
Big bad Katie.
So Bob and I are co-chairing the bylaws review task force. It's a very exciting task force. I know you're all jealous for the lawyers. So here is the timing. So we've had multiple meetings, including this afternoon. Frank serves on it, and he was with us today. So our timing, our proposed timing right now, we are hoping that by the executive committee meeting in June, at the end of June, that we are gonna have a proposed draft of the new bylaws to be reviewed and voted on at exec in June. And if exec approves it, then it will be immediately circulated to the whole board, so that then they'll have 30 days before our July, August full board meeting to review it, and then we could vote on it then. So that's the goal.
Got it, and folks recognize that our July full board meeting is July 26th, I think, so that's what gives us the 30-day window, because rule amendment changes require that circulation.
Yeah.
Paul?
Given our conversation about LPC, what's the public involvement?
They've all been public. And we have actually had attendees.
Would you mind giving like the top, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 major issues, like what are we majorly changing?
So,
Is there any, there's all just minor tweaks around the edges?
it's mostly tweaks around the edges. One of the big things that we had discussed a possibility going in. So one thing that we've spent a lot of time discussing is whether or not we would change the terms of the officers to 2 years instead of 1 year. On the theory that could we just please not have to have a nominating committee every single year? And because typically people who are appointed serve 2 years, we just thought like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? We can solve, anyway, we can get rid of the nominating committee. There was lots of discussion about it, and that is not the recommendation of the committee. That we've decided to stick with the 1 year term, and frankly, part of it had a lot, had to do with sort of term limits and things, and we thought, okay, if people are gonna end up serving only 8 years, like, and if you wanted to do the typical progression, you'd have to like, try and get on the executive committee within very quickly to try and go through. Anyway, there were a variety of reasons, and also like, what if somebody's elected, but then they're about to term out, then what do you do, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, for a variety of reasons, that is not going to be the recommendation of the bylaws committee. So that was a big one. Jessica, did you have a question?
Well, it's kind of connected to that, but different. Is there any discussion about extending the number of years that someone can hold an office?
No, we discussed that a little bit too, but again, we've decided, oh, for heaven's sakes, if people are, because of term limits, are only gonna be on there for 8 years, we're gonna want someone having a position for more than 3 years and not having the opportunity for other people to have it.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been that discussion. If you would like to
Term limits
suggest.
are 8 years, 10 years.
8. Frank, help me out here. What else?
You talked about those were the most sensitive.
Uh-huh.
The rest was a lot of lawyer on the agenda.
Yeah.
Your resume?
What meeting present that he?
Oh,
I thought FAR was boring.
Stop already. We're a dynamic group. But Bert also serves on the bylaws committee. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize that earlier, Bert. And you're reminding me that we did discuss briefly, maybe getting rid of the
Possibility of the 3rd year.
of maybe eliminating the possibility of a 3rd year. But we have not discussed maybe extending it past a 3rd year. Was that your question?
Well, the rule now is it has to be unanimous.
Exactly.
So do you eliminate the unanimity of it, or?
No, the discussion was simply because of term limits and things, should we say like, any position
Only
is
2.
2 years and out? But I
It's good to have that option.
yeah, so we haven't.
So you can get somebody just.
Marty, I think it's Marty's grandson. I'm the only one that sees it. It's really cute.
Get rid of that position, no one remembered that you had.
Oh, parliamentarian, that's
Parliamentarian.
correct.
Oh, that was one person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
We
it.
did eliminate that, so I think, yeah, I think we've gotten rid of some stuff that we've noticed that doesn't
Yeah.
apply anyway. And for example, like one thing that we were just discussing today, was actually the existing bylaws don't allow for any leave of absence. But that is allowed. And so we've added language saying that a leave of absence can be granted in very limited circumstances per the discretion of the chairperson in conjunction with the Manhattan Borough President. Right, so we're just trying to sort of,
But
Yeah.
not towards your term limit.
Actually, we didn't-
Well, it wouldn't, like, I just think of a case of a bereavement situation, right? Like, that's what I feel like the discussion before, and it's granted, but it doesn't count against your attendance factor.
It's like maternity leave.
Right.
and so frankly, you know, one of the biggest issues, but we haven't totally finalized on language, one of the biggest issues is just trying to make sure that we are consistent about hybrid participation and quorum and what counts as present and what counts as what was the phrase today?
Circumstance.
Yeah, an extraordinary circumstance. Anyway, sort of just trying to deal with all of that.
Okay, you are shortening we're proposing to shorten the nomination process. Right?
Yes, by a month. So we would start it in October now.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, and actually, in connection with that, we're also suggesting changing the nominating committee from 7 people to 5 people.
Or no less than,
No less.
if someone wants to go. 7,
9, they can go.
Right.
they're that lucky to
You
find
know,
that.
actually, thank you for the reminder, because I think we didn't include that in the language, so yeah.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay.
Other reports from me, I don't have any small meetings to report on this month. Port Authority stuff is about to reconvene, of which we are eager and excited for, to meet with the port on Wednesday of this week. I would note that the FAR working group work continues, and we expect maybe to hear from them at our June exec meeting. Potentially the plan.
I would love that.
Exactly, I know you could, Paul. And I've committed to Jesse that I will absolutely not convene another task force or working group for the remainder of my term. So.
He's on task force diet.
Hanukkah came early.
Yes, exactly, that's all 8, that is all 8, yes. So not much else, gosh, I think it was, I reported on full board with our meeting with EDC, but, couple of things coming up that you'll hear about soon. Full board is 2 weeks from now. That also will be in a hybrid meeting. Jeff will probably go over this, but Fulton Center. And so we'll have the pros there for technology. And looking forward to that on June 7th, I think it is. Yep. Okay, over to you, Jesse.
All right, yeah, so you have your full board agendas and your committee schedules in your Dropbox, but there's a hard copy here. If anybody wants to look at it, please do take a look at it and make sure you are aware of all the letters that we have or don't have. And then also just what's coming up down the pipe for the month of June in terms of committee work. Upcoming full board, right, so it's going to be hybrid. Similar, so you are expected to be there in person. It will, I promise you, the technology will be better than what we have tonight. We will have our vendor there with our cameras. And so that's it. We'll have microphones. It'll be very similar to the time one we did all those years ago, if you remember, at the Fulton Senior Center. The couple things that I know that has changed slightly is that they have no standing precautions, no requirements in terms of masking or vaccination process or anything like that, just so we're all aware. So that's not something that we can then require of our guests. So yeah, and then obviously we're assuming this is the last month. June will be the last month of our fully virtual capacity. So committees, I think if it's up to you all, but you can stay virtual if you want for the month of June. But then eventually we will be going probably into this format coming into July. And I think that's it. So office space, we're chugging it along. We're through our ULER. No one's called it up at council. So, yeah, we've been like so pissed. Oh my God. I was like, so what do you mean? I'm joking, Crystal. And so, yeah, we're chugging along and we should be all set up there. And again, I'm very excited. The space is going to be hopefully a real game changer for, being able to really run a committee out of that space. Fully with the full tech and all of that. And I think that's it. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting. That's nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
Katie, and then, Katie and then Paul.
and then
So,
Marty.
just a real quick question about the space. I remember that the last time we had a meeting, actually, that the night. I found them hard to understand when people were speaking to the night. They were terrible. And frankly, just from a perspective of a co-secretary. Anyway, do we have any ideas about is the miking system new or updated?
No, so the miking system was our miking system. What I think actually wasn't so much the miking system in my opinion, but I'm not trying to take the blame off me. I mean, I'm happy to look into it and see what they have. It was actually the acoustics and the HVAC, which was really loud, and that really drowned everything out. I can't speak to, I can find out about that, and if that's been modified since they opened. That was literally like the first year they renovated and they came back new, and so I can certainly find out. And they might so that's
Yeah, the acoustic for Tony Simone was good.
Oh, and St. Gills?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're at Fulton Center.
No, there was at St. Gills?
No,
there
He
was
was he was at Fulton, okay. So then hopefully,
there was no air conditioning, so that may be a trade-off.
Yeah, I don't know, hopefully maybe
it'll be a nice cool night.
Yeah.
But I mean, logistically, the goal is to be live streaming it again, right?
And hybrid.
And hybrid, so there should be some sort of vocal component or, what's the wrong word, but.
Yes, there will have to be for discussion to be heard online.
Yeah, there'll be two standing mics.
So I guess if I can't understand it there, maybe I can listen to it afterwards.
Yeah.
The thing out there.
Yeah, no, the audio on Zoom will always be better than in person.
Yeah.
So that will be going directly.
All right, well.
That'll be going directly from the mic, from the
box,
the system into the Zoom, so it'll be recorded fine, but we'll have to see. I'll definitely follow up. I do remember that being rough. I also say we're all in masks.
Yeah, no,
so,
that was very
yeah. So I think maybe.
Yeah,
it'll
I
be
had
okay,
people
but
yelling at me.
yeah.
Paul.
So, just for clarity, the committee meetings from now on will be held here, and then we'll move to the new office and be held there. We aren't doing committee meetings at like the offices we used to do them in.
Right now, my goal is to keep us here.
Here.
Yeah, well, yeah, so here also is a relative term, because our license agreement in this particular space is up soon.
I mean, committee meetings will be held in community district office.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wherever it is.
Wherever that is.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And then the second question, you had mentioned the combination July-August meeting is July 26th.
It's whatever Wednesday,
Last Wednesday of the month.
last Wednesday of the month.
I just want to make sure.
And then, so we don't have a beginning of July full board meeting. And so you'll have to think about any issues that are coming down the pike also, that if your committee is taking it up in June, that you anticipate, an early July vote on by the full board, that won't happen. So notification of exec to ratify is going to be critical for any June issues to think through, that the exec meeting in June is where we ratify those letters, and then adopted by the full board at the end of July. And we don't typically have a July exec unless sort of it's demanded, but that's just the gist for calendar purposes. We do have June exec, absolutely. So June, any committee issues that are timely in June should be brought before exec for ratification, for a vote, so that then they can go out and then the full board can ratify them at the end of July.
Okay. I have two people, Marty and then Carrie.
You were talking about the quality of the Zoom meetings. I have to say that this is, from my perspective, an amazingly well done technological feat that you did. the only, I know you can't see me saying this, and that's of course a problem. And you are out of focus for me. All the other people that are online are in clear focus. But I heard almost every word, which is really unusual for me. So thank you for a good job.
Thanks, Marty.
It's so low. Well, we scaled a low bar. I will take that. Thank you very much, Marty. Carrie?
I echo Marty. And if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to give some news. I got a call from Eric Botcher right before this meeting about former colored school number 4. He told me it was okay to share that he has secured $6 million from OMB to DSNY to rehabilitate the former colored school number 4, which Landmarks is voting on tomorrow to landmark. We are optimistic. And yeah, I just wanted to share some exciting news. So there will be, I guess, a press release tomorrow. So I figured you might want to know before. So that's it. And yay, Eric Botcher, and yay, Eric Washington, and yay, Chelsea Land Use. We rarely get something, we rarely make budget requests, and this was one of them, if you can believe it. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for a win.
All right, unless there's anybody else, any other questions for me?
And then no other questions for Jesse. So any new or old business?
Motion to adjourn?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Lazarin. And a second from Christine. Thanks, everybody online. See everybody soon. Thank you all.